And Leroy Logan is a retired police superintendent, a founding member of the Black Police Association, and is chairman for 30 years. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Great to have you on the show. Just give us your initial thoughts, anyway, on what we know about what happened to Child Q.
Well, from what I have read in the report, the officers responded to the school staff request to search the young lady in question, Child Q, on the suspicion of possession of drugs because they smelled cannabis on her. The staff had already carried out a search. The officers then conducted a search that was far beyond the reasonable grounds that were given because, one, the outer clothing had already been searched, but also they went on to do not only a strip search, but an intimate search without the appropriate adult being present or another member of staff. And of course, that's totally in contravention with the codes of practice under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and far beyond safeguarding and trauma-informed policing.
Yeah, I mean, Leroy, the police have said that it should never have happened and it was regrettable. But do you see this as a kind of individual case of something horrific or a systemic problem? You know, a review of stop and search of 9,378 found that in 81.7% of cases there was reasonable grounds to stop and search. So in essence, the overwhelming majority of instances it's been used, there has been reasonable grounds. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that it is something that is used too excessively and it's a systemic problem, or this is a kind of individual case where something wrong has clearly happened?
Let me say first thing, having used stop and search many times in my career, it is a good tool, but even though it needs to be intelligence-led. So it's a blunt tool sharpened up by community intelligence to ensure that you target the right people who are getting up to no good, whether it's crime and other matters. So as a result of that, you are able to reduce the impact of people going about their normal business. Unfortunately, the Met has been using stop and search indiscriminately for decades, since the SUS law, and then when the Police and Criminal Evidence Act repealed that in the early 80s, it has continued. And the race problem plays itself out in the disproportionate number of black people that's searched. You're 9 times more likely to be stopped if you're black than you're white. You're 3 times more likely to be strip searched if you're black than you're white. So this is an endemic problem that's not being dealt with. Now, these officers are carried out this search totally in breach of their protocols and the codes of conduct, as I've already said. And as a result of that, you wonder why. Well, that is through the culture, very, very strong culture in the Met, which I experienced for 30 years, that influences people's application of the law. You can have as many strategies as you want, but culture eats it for lunch and dinner, not to mention breakfast, because of the way in which it overrides the objectivity and the intelligence-based approach to it. And the other thing is, we've seen that young black people is being shown as an adult. They've been treated like adults, even though they're young people. So they don't have the appropriate support and safeguarding principles. So this young lady, Child Q, was subject to a double whammy. She was black and female. As we know, the Met Police is institutionally sexist as well.
Do we know for sure? Sorry to just quickly. Do we know for sure that the police officers who were doing this weren't black themselves?
No. They
would that change your opinion on this story if it turned out that they were?
Well, I doubt if a black officer would have gone to that extreme, because the cultural competence, the shared and common experience, and that's why you need a reflective organisation, so that you reduce these sort of instances and you instill more trust and confidence, because these sort of instances actually erode trust and confidence. And the Met is going through the least amount of trust, especially the black community, and for females for the last 20 years. So it shows that they're doing things over and over wrong, and it has to stop.
I mean, on that trust point, the data is quite clear on this. I mean, particularly Black Caribbeans have a comparatively low level of trust in the police. But when you talk about that point on culture within the police, I mean, what do you say to the other side who says that actually Black communities in particular are also disproportionately impacted by crime? And we know for some of the data for young Black boys in particular are significantly more likely to be a victim of murder. And so do you worry about the other side, that, you know, police are also trying to police in a very difficult environment, and there are mistakes that are made and that there are challenges that are made, and it's difficult negotiating that balance?
Well, I think you bought into a certain amount of data manipulation, because if you want to talk about disproportionate number of people subject to knife crime or gun crime, it depends on the context in the city or the town. You'll have disproportionate number of those crimes in Leeds committed by white people, or in other white majority cities and towns. So that is a false data that you really need to look into very carefully. But you also need to understand that the majority of Black people are housed in the most deprived areas. They've got the most highest number of depravity. So the actual services they receive are under the norm. Also, the type of policing is very heavy-handed. So Black and minority ethnic communities are housed in these areas. And as a result of that, the self-loathing and the infighting you find, especially when it comes to drug supply and everything, that can be replicated in any town or city. So let me just tell you this. Crime has no colour. Crime is crime. And policing should be done regardless of a person's background or culture or colour. And it has to be done appropriately and professionally, intelligence-led. And until that is sorted out with the new commissioner, changing the culture, dealing with the systemic failures of racism and sexism, we'll be talking about this for years to come.